sex workers on Reddit. What's your approach for special cases of clients, like obviously depressed, sad, or sick individuals? What was the most unfortunate case you've ever encountered, and how did it affect you? I once had a very sweet young man come to me wanting to lose his V-card. In talking to him, it became clear that he had severe social anxiety and likely some other mental health problems. He had never kissed anyone romantically or gone on a date. He was an immigrant who had never received any sex education from his school or parents. He also didn't have any friends. I felt so bad for him. I told him that I didn't think it was a good idea for his first time having sex to be with someone he just met. I suggested that we just try kissing. He had never seen a vulva before, so I gave a little anatomy lesson. Then I very gently told him that he would probably benefit more from seeing a therapist than an escort at this point in time. Therapy isn't something normal in his culture, so I had to do some convincing. I told him that if he went to therapy for a few months and still wanted to do it with me, I would do it. He trusted me, and he went to therapy. Several months later, he emailed me and thanked me. He had found a good therapist and was starting to make friends. He was hopeful about finding a girlfriend one day and had decided he wanted his first time to be special with someone he loved. I couldn't have been happier to lose a client. Story 2. I worked as a male escort on the side for about 2 years to earn some extra income while trying to get a job in another state. No, we don't get lonely housewives and other exotic fantasy stories. I did primarily stripping at parties and very little actual sex. One of my very rare occasions where I was hired for an actual intercourse session was probably one of the most interesting times of my life though, and ended up being my last for years. It was a friend of someone I did a party for. The actual client wasn't at the party. Anyway, she was one of those very extremely shy introvert girls, a little overweight, kissless virgin who threw her all into her career rather than dating throughout her early 20s. She was nearing 30, and I originally thought, according to her friend, that she just wanted to get the V-card thing out of the way. I get to her apartment, there's some anime dude posters, and I brought up that I used to watch that stuff back in high school. Apparently, she was obsessed with shuho anime. I didn't actually know what that was since I hadn't really followed any of this since Bleach was a thing. We got to talking about anime in Japan in general, and all of her favorite genre. She admits she was just going along with her friend on this whole escort thing. I've had this response before, and most of the time it's just a defensive excuse like, haha, I never hire someone. I'm just doing it to make my friend shut up. But this one was actually 100% genuine. Something about this was just way more interesting to me. So instead of striptease, foreplay, a whole bunch of licking, and maybe intercourse like usual with these one-on-one clients, I went ahead and offered to go on dinner first. Something I've only done maybe 3 times. Usually with the really nervous girls, but this time, I was genuinely curious. It was awesome to say the least. Once she had a few drinks in her, she wouldn't shut up, and I just let her lay into me and all sorts of anime, Japan travel, even furry stuff. I felt like a high schooler again, but instead of characters going demon form and slice each other up, it was all the surprisingly interesting romance stories and crazy things I didn't even know existed. Dinner ended, we split the bill, and hopped in the car. On the way back, the dam just broke. She completely lost it emotionally. All those lonely years came welling up, constantly surrounded by these wild romance anime she watches and manga she reads. We get back to her place and she just hung out and talked for a while. The idea of it being a session with a client went out the window at that point. We went on a walk around her block, swapped numbers, and called it a night. We dated for about 6 months after that until I finally got the job offer I had been dying for 6 states away. It was a clean breakup. We still chat online sometimes. Her transformation over those months was incredible. She lost weight and we regularly went on bike rides to help. She did end up losing her V-card about 2 weeks in. I don't think she was ever the one, but it's probably one of the most positive relationships I had over the years. I also realized that I broke all the escort rules here, but I wasn't even serious about it. I don't think you even can be a guy doing it. I also stopped escorting outside of 1 or 2 in the city I'm at now just for fun. Story 3. Veterans come home from tour will be out with their boys celebrating, and in a split second, a lap dance will go from sexy to holding them while they cry. I think the physically close nature of a lap dance that resembles being held triggers something, especially when the emotional barrier is down due to drinking. My approach is to let them be there as long as they need to be, or until my bosses kick us out. It breaks my heart because there isn't anything more I can do. I want to tell them they can come back and cry as often as they want, and they're safe there. But I think the feelings are just so large that they would want to avoid ever encountering them altogether. Only 2 have come back, and only one of those 2 utilized it as a safe space. Story 4. When I was 18, I was a phone entertainer, phone sex operator. There was this one older gentleman who called every Monday without fail. His wife had passed away, and they never had any children, so he was extremely lonely. He just wanted to talk to someone. I had the option of giving people free minutes, up to 1 hour per month, so he got all the minutes I could give. We talked. He literally just talked about life for about half an hour each week. He just wanted someone to talk to and share his life with. He passed away about a year after I started. I never got last names, but our dispatchers did. So when he didn't call one week, I messaged one of the dispatchers to see if she could find anything on him. I got a link to his obituary that day. Turns out, he was just an hour away. I went to that man's funeral and just broke down. His sister was there, and I guess seeing a 19-year-old crying like she lost everything got to her. I explained what he'd meant to me. I was in an abusive relationship at that time, and he was the closest thing I had to a friend, and how much I would miss the talks we had. She ended up giving me his favorite car hat jacket after our talk. I still use it every winter and think about how it felt to talk to him. I'm so grateful for the time I had to know him, and I miss him so much. If it weren't for him, I would still be in that relationship. But he gave me the strength and advice I needed to leave. R.I.P. Hooli, I miss you, and still have a glass of Johnny Black every year for your birthday. Story 5. I work in a sex club, and we have a program for mentally and physically disabled people who are getting money from the government to come to us. The most special one was with a man who was mentally and physically disabled and couldn't speak, so he could only let me know if he liked something with his eyes. 1 time means yes, and 2 times means no. You need to take a lot of time and have patience with them. To me, it's a big pressure to make it an amazing time for them, and I always try my hardest so they can enjoy it. I always give them a little extra time because they only get in once every few months or so. Story 6. A few years ago, I had a client book me for a dinner date. During the date, he started crying and told me he just got a divorce. He and I started seeing each other often, and I actually met his daughters once. It wasn't planned. His ex-wife was a demanding bee. He loved his daughters so much. He loved to cook and would make his cute homemade lunches for them. He had a terrible time sleeping. He would often get drunk because he was trying to dull the pain. For a while, he found a girlfriend, but it turned out she was just using him for money. The last time I saw him, he was just talking about taking a vacation to Mexico. I didn't hear from him again for a while, and I figured he must have found someone special. I'm not really sure what compelled me, but I googled him. I found his obituary. To this day, it kills me inside because maybe he wasn't really going on vacation. Maybe it meant he was going to end himself. He died only about a week after the last time I saw him. I feel really guilty and I think of him often. He was a really nice person and I feel terrible that he won't see his daughters grow up. Story 7. I once got a call from a guy asking if my place was handicap accessible. I said yes and he showed up. I opened the door and he wheels in and I asked how he'd like to do it or what he was interested in. Turns out he was paralyzed from the waist down. He said he really enjoyed kissing to start, but that any kind of nipple play drove him crazy. I legit spent an hour sucking and biting this guy's nipple, and it drove him crazy. I made my rate with no actual penetration, and he seemed so very pleased to find someone willing to just suck his nipples. Best appointment ever. I've also had a guy that messaged me saying he wanted to get to know me. This usually means he wants to bone for free and is trying to play my emotions to achieve this. But this guy was really just a lonely dude that worked too much and didn't have time for romance. I went to his place and just laid on his bed and talked for the entire time. I ended up doing this several times and felt really good about being able to talk to someone he could just sit and talk to. Eventually he wanted to go sexual, which was fine, but then he started cheaping out on me because we're friends. Nah bruh, I still gotta pay my bills. But initially, it was very sweet. Story 8. I worked as a pro dom many years ago, and there was this one particular session that I'll always remember. The gentleman was in his 40s or 50s, and initially, he just said he wanted a spanking session. During our negotiation, right beforehand, he told me it was important to him that I bring him to tears. He broke about 45 minutes into the session, and it was like a damn breaking. He sobbed and hyperventilated and wailed while I held him, stroking his hair and soothing him and whispering reassuring things for nearly an hour. When he eventually calmed down enough to talk, he told me that his mother had died suddenly 5 years before, and that despite being devastated by it, he hadn't been able to cry. Not once. His grief had been trapped inside for all that time. He couldn't let go enough to express it before that day. He called me about once a week for several months after, just to thank me again, and each time he sounded brighter, happier. By the last time we talked, he sounded like a completely different person than the man I had met. It was wonderful to see him blossom. It's not a job I would ever return to, but that experience with him made the entire job worth it. Story 9. A decade ago, working at a casino, I watched a senior's crap dealer absolutely lambast a guy. The player was a serious whale, dressed well and surrounded by lackeys and absolutely loaded with cash. The dealer ignored all that and talked to him like he was a classmate in elementary school. Hey, hammerhead, you didn't learn your lesson last time? You gotta come in here on my shift and blow a whole goddamn sailboat. Well, fine, I got big hands, I can take it from you. The player loved it. He spends his whole life getting his boots licked by anyone who meets his eyes. And this name tag wearing douchebag never lets up on him. I think this was the kind of therapy for him. He can't go to a restaurant or a theater or a banquet without being spotted and slathered with psychophants. When this one spot, he can get access to fist bumps and chicken jokes and feel like a regular kind of guy. Story 10. So I should probably use a throwaway, but F it. I was a sugar baby in my early 20s as a way to make extra cash. It wasn't necessarily a pay-for-sex type agreement, more of a mutually beneficial relationship where I would get gifts and an allowance in return for a no-strings-attached girlfriend and boyfriend type relationship. Anyhow, a guy had seen my profile and asked me out on a date. First date went well. He was shy and awkward, and ugly if we're being honest, but was incredibly kind and polite. He didn't try anything sexual, and that was a good sign for me, because most guys are just in it for that which isn't my deal. Second date, I agreed to go to his house to watch a movie. When I showed up, he explained that his wife had recently left him. She had cancer for 4 years, and he was her main caretaker, and after she was cured, she up and left him for a much younger man. He asked if I would wear his wife's robe and jewelry and perfume, which was very sad but also extremely creepy. He showed me pictures of their wedding and vacations, and he talked about how he wanted kids and never had them because she didn't. It was so sad. After that night, I cut ties. I told him it seems his heart was too broken, he's just lonely. But I didn't want him to have to pay me for companionship. Story 11. A lot of guys used to be really ashamed about it, which I always thought was sad. I loved my job, and the way I saw it, we're all safe, consenting adults. I'm making a living, and they should just have a pressure-free, shame-free way to enjoy themselves. We're all humans, and the fact is, lots of us like sex. There shouldn't be any shame attached. Also, I'd sometimes get guys who pretty much just wanted a nude female therapist. I remember having this one customer once though. This was at a strip club I worked at, and as soon as we went in a private room, I started getting undressed and he quietly asked me not to and just to sit with him. Not unusual, so I did as he asked. He was a really intelligent bloke, an older guy, seemed like a sort of high-up, successful, educated guy. He was really apologetic to me for just wanting a chat, and I, as usual when this happens, tried to be reassuring and explained that if he just wants a chat, I really am more than happy to. In the room with me, it sort of became obvious that he thought he didn't deserve to look at me, or at women at all. It was really sad. It wasn't about me at all. You could just see that this guy really hated himself. Like he just seemed so upset and disgusted at himself. And he was absolutely lovely. I wish I could help guys not to feel that way about themselves, but sometimes there's not much you can do. Story 12. I met an older man one night while working as an escort. He asked me if I'd like a drink, and when we started talking, we talked all the way through the hour, and when it was up, he tipped me $100 and asked me to come again the following Sunday. He wasn't able to get an erection, and so intercourse was not possible. He wanted a friend, and he found one in me. At the time, I was on heroin, and hanging out with him reminded me of who I was. When my boyfriend beat me up one night, I called him, and he came and picked me up. "Take off your sunglasses," he said. I took them off and showed him my eyes, black and swollen. God damn it. He took me home and took care of me until I healed. The friendship persisted. I went to prison, and he wrote and called and sent money. I got clean in prison, and I found God, and I tried to tell him about it, but he was not having it. "Don't ever talk to me about that God stuff again," he growled. When I got out, I started a 12-step group and continued in my relationship with God. I was able to get my son back, I got a job, I went to his house one day, clean and clear-headed, and he was so happy for me. Then he pulled out an old family Bible, and he just wanted to show me. When he opened it, a Polaroid of a naked woman came out. He was humiliated. He crumbled it in his hand. He didn't want me to see that side of him. I complimented his Bible, but didn't press him about God. A few days later, I got a phone call. He had died. He was a good friend at a time in my life when we could both use a friend. I'll never forget him. He showed me kindness. I guess I needed to write this for me. Reading it over, I see that he wasn't the one who was depressed, sick, etc. I was. 13 years later, I'm still sober, and I still hold him in high regard in my heart. Story 13. When I was sugaring, I know a client who would pay me serious bucks to dress modestly, light makeup, and tell me stories about school. It turns out he lost his daughter in a car accident, went to therapy to no avail, failed his marriage due to grief, and is very lonely. He simply misses little sunshine, I suppose. He called me Sunshine. His gifts to me are also Orthodox father gifts, a knit sweater, a journal, and once a flower hair clip. He asked me once if I would like to go fishing with him. I declined. I played along naively at first, but then the situation made me extremely upset, and I could not deal with other clients. He was role-playing so good. I guess sometimes it really slipped his mind. He asked me about dreams and goals, schools, teachers, possible boyfriends. I sadly have to part ways with him after a couple months. He understood that I had to move out. Story 14. There was one young man from Russia. He kept asking me about my mom and if I thought I was saved, if I was a Christian. Not as weird as it sounds considering I had made some comments on my public media about it. I met him once for a meet and greet and then once more in person. He had admitted he was a virgin and talked about seeing other providers but not consummating anything. We got to a point where we were almost there and I stopped us. The look on his face, despite him saying yes several times, told me he was going to regret it later. We ended up cuddling some, but I never heard from him again after he left. I just knew that I didn't want to be the person he looked back on as an empty connection. Story 15. I turned to sex work to get out of an incredibly horrible situation. I can understand why people make the decision to go into it willingly. The reason I got out was stigma. After a while, I wound up mainly doing pro-dom work. I put a twist on it. I'd sit down with clients, talk about what they wanted to accomplish, and we'd figure out a plan. When they sell off the plan, there'd be a previously negotiated consequence. Of course, I had some clients for whom it was just a fetish thing, and I'd oblige. I had no problem either way as long as they paid. Well, this one guy seemed like it was just a fetish thing. I'd always meet for coffee to vet them. After the initial meeting, at our first actual session, he asked me to wear a shirt of his dad's. Weird, but okay. Then he asked me to do rather painful things to him, and he was rather specific about what he wanted done. Okay, that was literally my job. Then he started to cry and asked if he could yell at me. He couldn't get over his childhood trauma. I did not feel safe being his outlet for that. Story 16. I had a client contact me by text, and at first he just asked if I did kinky stuff. I said that depends on what he wants, but that I wouldn't judge him either way. Then he described his fantasy little by little, escalating every time I said sure, I'll do that. First, he just wanted me to degrade him verbally, calling him a nerd, say he's ugly, quite tame. Then he upped the degrading. He wanted me to come in, grab the money he'd prepared by the door, and do my thing while telling him how sad it was that he had to pay women to do it with him, and how no one would ever want him, and then leave. At first, I was fine with it, but as he progressed and started getting into scat territory, come in, take the money, crap on his chest, leave. It was a bit far for me, but most of all, I started to realize that he meant it. It wasn't a fantasy for him. He genuinely believed that he was nothing but an ugly nerd whom no one would ever love or want to be with, and that it was sad that he was forced to pay me to even touch him. I could not do that to another person. I suggested therapy and declined his offer, telling him that there's nothing wrong with paying for sex if that's what you want, but that he didn't seem to actually want it. Story 17. I was a higher-end escort in my early 20s. I had one guy that paid thousands of dollars for some pretty kinky crap. Lots of and sex toys involved and jointly incorporated. He had a rather calm mental breakdown, expressed his guilt because he's a married father, always showed up in his family minivan. He asked me to take all his and sex toys and throw them away, declaring that he was done living that lifestyle. I kindly obliged, kept it all in my closet for him, 2 trash bags full of dildos, and just shy of an ounce of He eventually called me asking for it back one day, but I had just moved and threw it away in my apartment's dumpster. I locked the white powder in a safe, used 2 rolls of duct tape for extra security, and labeled it hazardous. I have sporadically wondered how he's doing. I hope he found peace one way or another.